And it's also sort of a dividing line between the Union and Confederate forces on July 2nd and 3rd, with most of the Confederate Army, with the exception of some Alabamans and Texans, being over here to our left or west of us, with pretty much the entirety of the Union Army being to our east or right of us. Now, I told you earlier that the Union Army had within it 90,000 men. It's composed of 7 infantry and 1 cavalry corps. These infantry corps are 9,000 to 13,000 men apiece. 6 of the 7 are commanded by graduates of West Point. 1 is not, the Union 3rd Corps. General Sickles is what is commonly referred to as a political general. Both sides had them. Sometimes they worked out, sometimes they didn't. West Point graduates didn't always work out either. Sickles had been a congressman from New York City in the 1850s. When the war breaks out, he's going to raise 5,000 New Yorkers for U.S. service. This is how he becomes a brigadier general. He comes here to Gettysburg as a 2-star general, major general, in command of 10,500 men. I consider him brave and charismatic, but he had a couple of problems. Number one, he doesn't know much about military tactics. And to make things worse, he thinks he does. So on July 2nd, his corps should have been holding a position on the lower third of Cemetery Ridge. Or, don't know how well we're going to be able to see it, about from where the Pennsylvania mine is today, which is usually right in front of us in that direction right now, okay? And Little Round Top. Little Round Top will be the second tree line you can see off here to your right in front. But Sickles' headquarters is near the Trossel barn, and you can see that over here to your left in front. He knows from a prior reconnaissance that the Confederates are out in that tree line that we just got finished driving through. His concern is that they're going to advance once Clint gets parked there. I want you to look behind you on either side. Look behind you now. And he's concerned now that the Confederates are going to advance and seize the high ground in the peach orchard. He'll ask Meade for permission to move to a new position. He never gets it. So what does he do? He moves them anyway to a new position, which will be well in advance of the rest of the Union line, and ultimately in the shape of 2 sides of a triangle. Now let's look at it to the extent we can see it from here, and then I'll ask you to go to the miniature map of July 2nd. This new position that Sickles moves to basically has 2 wings to it. The right wing starts out about midway. Well, you can see the first barn. I'm not sure if you can see the second. It's just going to start out to the right of that barn you can see just beyond the tree in the distance. And then it comes towards us along the road, with the angle in the line being where we just made the turn, at the intersection of the Wheatfield and Emmitsburg Road. The left wing goes down the Wheatfield Road, which would have been here. When it gets closer to the trees, you see way in the distance there, it goes through them. That's where the Rose Wheatfield is. And then the line ends at a place with a very colorful name. It's known as the Devil's Den. Now, let's take a look at the miniature map of July 2nd. If you want to orient this properly, in other words, to have it facing north, the tops of Meade's and Lee's head should be facing to your left. I'd walk this down the aisle, but I am not on a cordless mic, okay? Tops of Lee's and Meade's head should be to your left. Now, the Confederate line would be in red. The Union line would be in blue. Where are we? Right about where the first S in Sickles' name is. The position he should have been holding would have been a little bit below where it says Hancock, to a little bit below where the second S in his name is. This is what he does. You see that blue line that looks like 2 sides of a triangle? So now, when Longstreet attacks, the Union Army is going to have several problems. Number one, look to the north, in that direction. There's a gap there. You see that red arrow that's aiming towards it? So they're unconnected to the north. Secondly, Meade doesn't know that Sickles has made the move for at least a half an hour. Thirdly, Sickles' new line is almost twice the length of his original line. So even under the best of circumstances, he doesn't have enough men to adequately hold that position. And lastly, it's a defensive line that's no longer straight. It has an angle in it. And that angle is right at the peach orchard. Why is that a problem? Well, those two red arrows are trying to indicate something to you. If you attack both sides of an angle line at the same time, it's a little bit like a double team block in football, American football. You can typically overpower the area, 2-on-1, because the Union soldiers in the Petroids, you can only point their weapons in one direction at a time, and now they're taking fire from two different directions. So what I would suggest to you is that on July 2nd, critical day of the battle, everything revolves around what Sickles does. The Union will send all sorts of reinforcements to different parts of his battle line to try and keep it from collapsing. They'll even send men to places where he should have been. So the reason that 20th Maine and Vincent's Brigade get the little round up is because Sickles either abandoned the position or was never there to begin with. That's much more likely. So, bigger picture now. Longstreet strikes the Union 3rd Corps. In 2.5 hours of fighting, the 3rd Corps loses 40% of its men. The remnants drift back to Cemetery Ridge, which is where they should have been to begin with. Saving grace for the Union Army is that eventually, although with great difficulty, they're going to patch together that old back line, as you see in the July 3rd map. So what happens to Sickles? Well, he should have been court-martialed. I've had kids tell me he should have been hung or shot. I had somebody a number of years ago tell me he should have been guillotined. Well, being shot is close to what happens. He'll be struck by an artillery shell a little bit to the left of the tropsel barn. Later have his right leg amputated above the knee. He'll take it back to Washington with him, donate it to a medical school, and visit his own leg several times. One time complaining that the foot was not attached to it. So Sickles is a darn colorful individual, is he not? Okay. We have problems today too, don't we? But I try and stay clear of contemporary politics, at least on tours. Not that I don't have my opinions. Now, if you look over there towards the tropsel barn, get your paper towel out of the end. Okay, here we go, high tech. You see the barn? Has a couple of diamond-shaped holes in it. Look below in a moment, the one on the right-hand side, you can see where an artillery shell goes clean through the brick. And that tree that's in front of the barn is a 235-year-old swamp oak. It's also known as a witness tree. You should be able to see that hole now if you can see it at all. Okay? Sickles will get an avenue named after him. Coming up there on the right, never gets an equestrian statue. Asked about this a number of times as he comes back here. As a member of the New York State Monuments Commission, standard response, the whole damn battlefield is my monument. Some truth in that statement. A congressman in the 1850s, re-elected in the 1890s, in 1895, it's his legislation which creates the Gettysburg National Military Park. Yes, there you go, it's true. Over here to your right, the Rose wheat field. 4,000 casualties in this 24-acre wheat field. That's because it's not just one attack and repulse. It's a series of 6 attacks and counterattacks, hand-to-hand fighting, also some of the only known bayonet deaths. One individual who walks through there on July 5th said, you could not go from one corner of the wheat field to another without stepping on a dead body. Probably a slight exaggeration. Little round top off there to our right in front. Made more important because the farm is removing most of the trees from its western slope prior to the Civil War. They wanted the wood for various purposes. Yeah. Now we just went over one bridge. We'll go over a couple of others. These bridges were not here. Small Stream was. Real name of the stream is Plum Run. Winds up getting the nickname after the battle of Bloody Run. And the Valley of Death. That would be that southwesterly corner of Little Round Top, given that name because of all the Confederate Union soldiers killed, seriously wounded, attempting to defend or attack Little Round Top. And we get up to the main slope of the hill, you'll understand the reason why a lot better than you can from here. Now Sickles has no 3rd Corps troops on that hill, although that should have been the left of his line. He will place his left in this area coming up on our right, which is known as the Devil's Den. The rocks and boulders that you see are from an underground volcano, according to geologists that came through the Earth's crust 200 million years ago. And then over time, the lava cooled, hardened, and has been eroding ever since. So some 3rd Corps troops near the crest of the hill. As you'll notice, it's high ground from where we are. But is it high ground compared to Little Round Top? Not really. So this position, Devil's Den to your right, will be struck by Confederates from Texas and Alabama, and then right behind them will come Henry Benning's Georgia Brigade, and they'll take the Devil's Den and hold it through July 4th. Yes, Fort Benning, Georgia is named for Henry Benning. As we make the turn, take a look up the hill and try to imagine yourself as someone in the 4th or 5th Texas. Look how difficult that climb would have been. Temperature is 85 degrees, high humidity, woolen uniforms, carrying a rifle weighing 10 or 12 pounds, 5 pounds of bullets, a canteen, water's heavy. Then when you get near the top of the hill, you're going to have Union soldiers firing back down at you. The only thing they would not be confronting is the stone wall, which was built on July 3rd. Why not July 2nd? Didn't have enough time to build it, as we'll get into. Now, for those of you who have read Killer Angel's novel or seen the Ted Turner film Gettysburg, I'll point out to you where the 20th Maine would have been. It would have been on this little knoll, now called Vincent Spur, on the other side of the modern-day Park Road. 360 men, placed there by the brigade commander, Strong Vincent, with orders to hold that ground at all hazards. They'll be attacked 6 times by 2 Alabama regiments. Run out of ammunition, they're going to execute a bayonet charge down the other side of the hill, capturing 150 Alabamas. In the film Gettysburg, this is the entire second day. It's only one of the things that holds Little Round Top. So the point I'll make here is history versus Hollywood, but not necessarily one and the same. My guess is that many of you have seen perhaps the most famous Civil War movie of all time, Gone with the Wind. How much did you learn about the Battle of Atlanta, other than the fact it burned? Another example of history versus Hollywood. Gee, it looks like it's slowing down a little bit here. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk up this path here, probably close to the artillery or maybe the plaques, depending upon the foot traffic. Join me, and I will tell you how the Union Army saves this position.